Welcome to ValueVest Daily. Today, we're diving deep into a high-stakes battle that's playing out right now, everywhere from the halls of Washington to the balance sheets of the world's biggest banks. And this is a fight for your money, pitting the old guard of traditional finance against the really disruptive power of stablecoins. It's a conflict that was really born from this new high-interest rate world we live in, where the cash just sitting in your bank account has suddenly become incredibly valuable. So this is the story of who gets to profit from that value, and let me tell you, the outcome could totally reshape the future of banking and create some massive opportunities for investors.
Okay, let's just cut right to the heart of the matter, because this whole multi-billion-dollar fight really boils down to the two numbers you see on your screen. On the left, you've got the national average yield for a checking account, a pathetic 1/100%. I mean, think about that. For every $10,000 you keep in the bank, you earn a single dollar over an entire year. Now look to the right. That's the approximate yield you can get holding a stablecoin like USDC on different platforms. That's 5%. So on that same $10,000, that's $500 a year. We're not talking about a small difference here. This isn't a gap. It's a canyon. It's a 500-fold difference. And that right there, that canyon, is exactly why the banking industry is spending millions of dollars in a desperate panic to make the option on the right completely illegal.
And that leads us to the big question, right? The central question of our entire breakdown today. I mean, this isn't just a small line item in a budget. We're talking about the most powerful banking groups in the world deploying their top lobbyists, funding campaign donations, and running these really sophisticated PR campaigns. The amount of political capital being burned through is just immense, and it all points to one thing. They are terrified. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what they're so afraid of. And if you hold USDC, if you use stablecoins, or if you're even looking at Circle's upcoming IPO with the ticker CRCL, what we're about to lay out is absolutely critical for you to understand.
So to get to the bottom of this whole thing, we've broken down our deep dive to cover all the bases. We'll kick things off with the great yield divide and the clashing business models at the center of it all. Then we'll get into the actual numbers and show you exactly why the banks are panicking. From there, we'll dissect the first major legislative fight, the Genius Act, and the kind of brilliant loophole the crypto world found. And that sets the stage for the main event, the Clarity Act showdown. And finally, we'll bring it all together for you, analyzing what this means for you as an investor before we deliver our final verdict on where things stand.
All right, so let's jump into our first section, the Great Yield Divide. To really get why trillions of dollars are at stake here, you first have to understand the basic mechanics of how both sides make money from your cash. And this isn't just a friendly competition, it's a full-on collision between a business model that's centuries old and a brand new piece of technology.
So the key thing to understand here is something called net interest margin. It's been the bread and butter of banking for, well, forever. Banks take in your deposits, your money, at a super low cost, right? Like that 0.01% APY. They then turn right around and lend that money out for mortgages, car loans, you name it, at much, much higher rates, say 6, 7, 8%. That huge gap between what they pay for your money and what they earn from lending it out, that's their core profit. Your savings are basically the cheap raw material for their entire profit engine. Now, contrast that with a fully reserved stablecoin like USDC. When you give Circle, that's the issuer, a dollar, they don't lend it out. They have to hold a dollar's worth of really safe liquid assets in reserve, and a huge chunk of that is short-term U.S. Treasury bills. And in today's world, those T-bills are yielding around 5%. So the crypto ecosystem, the exchanges, the wallets, they can then pass a big slice of that yield back to you, effectively cutting out the old-school banking middleman and its massive profit margin. And that fundamental threat to their business model leads us right into our next section, why the banks are panicking. And trust me, panicking is not an exaggeration. It's one thing to talk about a threat in theory, but when you see the staggering numbers that actually put a price tag on their fear, you'll get why they see this as, well, pretty much an existential crisis.
And this number right here just perfectly illustrates the scale of what's on the line. $186 billion. Let's put that in perspective. This is roughly the annual, basically risk-free interest income that U.S. banks are earning from the Federal Reserve just on the reserves they hold. This income is a direct result of the Fed hiking rates, and it's generated on capital that comes from, you guessed it, their customers' deposits. But as we just saw, they pass almost none of it back. This right here is the massive, low-effort profit pool they are fighting tooth and nail to protect from anyone and everyone. But if $186 billion is the prize they're trying to protect, this number, $6 trillion, that is the nightmare scenario that genuinely keeps bank CEOs up at night. This figure actually comes from the banking industry itself, from testimony they gave to Congress as a dire warning.
Their argument is that if even a fraction of the nearly $18 trillion in U.S. bank deposits starts chasing higher yields in stablecoins, it could trigger a mass exodus of capital. They call it deposit flight, and we all saw a little preview of how dangerous that can be during the regional banking crisis back in 2023. An exodus of this size would just crush their business model, dramatically increasing their funding costs and, in their words, could destabilize the entire U.S. banking system.
So how do they justify this whole fight in public? I mean, they can't just come out and say, hey, we're trying to protect our profits. Of course not. Instead, they frame it as an issue of fairness and safety, using this key phrase you'll hear them say over and over again, regulatory arbitrage. And the argument goes something like this. We banks are heavily regulated. We have to pay for FDIC insurance, hold tons of capital, follow a mountain of rules to protect people. And they argue that stablecoin issuers don't have these same costly burdens, which allows them to offer higher yields just because they're playing on an uneven field. You have to admit it's a pretty compelling argument on the surface, which is exactly why it gets so much traction in Washington.
And this brings us to the first big legislative battle where the banks really tried to shut this whole thing down. In the fascinating, almost accidental way, the crypto industry fought back. This is the story of the Genius Act and its, shall we say, unintended consequences.
So let's walk through the timeline of what happened. In July of 2025, the banks scored what they thought was a huge victory. But by the end of that year, a clever little workaround popped up as exchanges just started offering USDC rewards anyway. And that move immediately triggered a response from the big banking regulators, like the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, and the FDIC. These powerful agencies saw the loophole and immediately started scrambling to write new rules to play catch-up.
So what did the Genius Act actually do? Well, the political mood in mid-2025 was basically do something about crypto. The banks jumped on that opportunity and successfully lobbied to get a rule in there that was very, very specific. As you can see, it prohibits stablecoin issuers, companies like CRCL, from paying interest directly. Their logic was pretty simple. Just cut off the yield right at the source. The focus on that one single word, issuers, was a very calculated move. But as we're about to see, it was also a huge miscalculation.
And that one little word created this brilliant three-step workaround. So, step 1. The ban works on CRCL. After the Genius Act, CRCL cannot legally send you an interest payment. The banks thought, checkmate. But then step 2 reveals the loophole. The law says absolutely nothing about third parties. It doesn't stop an exchange like Coinbase or a wallet provider. And these companies have their own revenue, so they realized they could just use a tiny piece of their own profits to offer a reward to users for holding USDC on their platform. So step 3, the result? For you, the end user, the experience is basically identical. You hold USDC and you watch your balance grow. It was just a classic example of an innovative industry reading the literal words of the law and legally engineering a solution that kept the core benefit alive for consumers.
Now, as you can probably imagine, that clever workaround did not sit well with the banking lobby. They went right back to their friends in Congress and basically said, hey, the job isn't finished. And this sets the stage for the current, much more aggressive, and potentially final battle in this war over yield. This is the Clarity Act showdown.
The Clarity Act is basically the bank's legislative sledgehammer. It's designed to slam the Genius Act loophole shut and any other potential workarounds for good. The key language in the new bills targets any passive income or rewards program tied to a stablecoin balance. See how much broader that is? It wouldn't matter if it's CRCL or a third party paying you. If you are earning a return just for holding a stablecoin, the Clarity Act wants to make it illegal. They are, however, being careful to allow things like credit card rewards, like getting 1% cash back in USDC, so they can still claim they aren't totally anti-innovation.
And to sell this much tougher bill, they've really turned up the volume on the rhetoric. The American Bankers Association is no longer just talking about a level playing field. As this quote shows, they're now framing this as an issue of systemic risk and national financial stability. Their argument in Senate hearings is that allowing a multi-trillion-dollar shadow banking system to grow outside of their control is just a recipe for disaster. It's a powerful, fear-based argument, and for a long time, it was actually winning.
For months, it really felt like the momentum was on the bank's side. The Clarity Act was getting more and more support, and it looked like a ban was all but inevitable. But then on April 8th of this year, a very unexpected player jumped into the ring, the White House's own Council of Economic Advisors. They dropped an absolute bombshell of a report that completely changed the dynamic of this fight, because it wasn't based on scary stories or rhetoric. It was based on something that had been missing from this whole conversation: cold, hard economic data.
Now, what's so powerful about this is that it takes the bank's #1 claim, that this ban is necessary for the economy, and just systematically dismantles it using the government's own numbers. The first line is the supposed benefit, increase in bank lending. The report found the effect would be a tiny $2.1 billion increase, a statistical rounding error of 0.02%. But now look at the cost. The net cost to consumers is a negative $800 million. That's the yield that everyday people and small businesses would lose. So the White House's own data shows a policy that provides almost zero economic benefit while directly taking money out of the pockets of consumers. This report was a total game changer because it gave politicians who are on the fence the perfect data-driven excuse to oppose the Clarity Act. So we have this incredible legislative drama playing out. You got a clever loophole, a powerful lobbying machine, and a bombshell report. But what does all of this actually mean for your portfolio? Let's pivot from DC to Wall Street and break down the direct impact on USDC and its issuer, CRCL, which, as we said, is expected to go public under the ticker CRCL. Before we can really analyze the stock, you have to understand the business, and this chart makes it crystal clear. The staggering 95% of CRCL's revenue comes directly from the interest it earns on its massive reserve portfolio. I mean, with over $100 billion in USDC out there, backed mainly by T-bills yielding 5%, that's a $5 billion revenue stream right there. And what's so critical to understand is that CRCL's business model does not depend on paying yield to you. Their model is incredibly simple and robust. They earn interest on the float. And this is why even a full-on yield ban wouldn't kill the company. It would just slow down the growth of its main product.
So, this all leads to a really clear bull versus bear case for the CRCL stock. The bull case is simple. The White House report helps kill the yield ban, leading to friendly regulations. This could open the floodgates for billions in corporate money to move into USDC, causing explosive growth in CRCL's reserves and sending profits and the stock price skyrocketing. The bear case is that the banking lobby somehow still pushes a strict ban through. This would, without a doubt, slow down USDC adoption because the main incentive is gone. The stock would take a big hit as everyone resets their growth expectations. But, and this is the key, the core business survives. USDC would still be a useful payment tool, and CRCL would still earn interest on its existing reserves. So the bear case isn't bankruptcy. It's just a shift from being a hyper-growth disruptor to a much slower-growing piece of financial plumbing.
All right, so let's bring it all together for the final verdict. With all this back and forth, where do we stand right at this very moment? And what are the key signals you need to be watching for in the next few weeks and months?
Here are the 4 crucial takeaways. First, never forget what this is really about. It's a commercial fight over the bank's access to cheap money, just dressed up as a debate about risk. Second, the crypto industry has already proven it's nimble and can adapt. Third, that White House report is the single most important development so far, giving the crypto world a powerful, data-driven weapon. And finally, this fight is far from over. The key event to watch now is the Clarity Act markup session in the Senate. That's where they'll debate and vote on the specific words in the bill, and the outcome of that session will tell us pretty much everything we need to know.
And that really leaves us with this one final thought. As you watch this all unfold, just remember that this isn't just some niche story about crypto rules. This is a fundamental debate about competition in our financial system. It's about whether legacy institutions can use their political power to shut down innovation that directly benefits you, the consumer. So the real question isn't just about stablecoins, it's about who you think should have control over your money and the returns it can generate.
Now, before we wrap up, just the important disclaimer. This is not financial or tax advice. Everything we've presented today is for educational purposes only. This regulatory world can and does change incredibly fast. So please always do your own research before making any investment decisions. Please subscribe, like, and share ValueVest Daily for daily learning opportunities before you put your money to work. Your support really helps us create more deep dives just like this one. And one more thing, we want to hear from you. Please drop a comment if you want us to deep dive into any specific high-risk reward opportunities. We read every single one. Thanks for watching.